Hello, I'm Jamie Johnson, and welcome to another segment of Western Wisconsin Journal. I'm the government and political correspondent, and for the time being, I should say, because we're going to be adding another correspondent to help us with community events. But my special guest today is Dr. Nick Ouellette, our new superintendent here in the Hudson School District. Dr. Nick, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Thank you for coming on fairly short notice. I know that you're really busy getting used to the job, and in fact today and yesterday you just completed your two-day planning retreat with your directors. I want to get into the job itself, but before we do, a little bit about your background and so forth. Just to give folks an idea, you started this job on July 1 officially, correct?
Yeah, absolutely.
And so, we had the interviews. There was first round of interviews and then a second longer interview in March, and that's when we offered you the job then in late March. And so not a lot of time has progressed, but we'll talk about how that interview process goes. First, tell me about your background, where you were raised, your family, and your education.
Absolutely. Well, from Dubuque originally. That's where I was born and raised. My parents still reside there. From high school, went on to college at the University of Northern Iowa. Got a degree in technology education with a minor in general industry. I knew I wanted to teach, but I also wanted to teach with my hands. And,
so tech ed, that's kind of like us old school, industrial arts, right?
Industrial arts. So I taught everything from computers to auto mechanics to woodworking to construction, and built houses with kids for a while as well. And so just great experiences. From there, I went accepted a position in Illinois, in Hampshire, Illinois. Great opportunity. School district of 600, school building of 600 kids. Unique because we were on the outskirts of Illinois, Chicago, and we had two other high schools in our district with over 3,000 kids apiece in them. Okay. And so that high school really kind of started to grow and has exploded. I met my wife while I was out in Illinois, and she was from the Des Moines area, so that meant then we were from the Des Moines area. Moved back to Iowa. And taught tech ed for 3 more years at West Des Moines Valley High School. Had great experiences there. Again, same type of thing, everything from computers to home.
So West Des Moines, so that was a suburban or
suburban school district, about 8,500 students in that school district.
So bigger than Hudson.
Bigger than Hudson. The high school itself was a 10-12 building with about 2,000 students in the building. And so really unique situation, very high performing, probably one of the highest performing high schools in the state of Iowa. I got the bug for administration, went into the Des Moines public school system, had 2 different experiences there. One at their central campus as an assistant principal there, which was a magnet school for both career and tech and AP and college prep. That building, we had close to 3,000 kids in that building through a given day. Very large school building, and then went to be an assistant principal at East High School in Des Moines, which is another very urban setting. We were about 2,500 students at the high school, so I was one of 4 assistant principals there.
Again, bigger than Hudson.
Yeah, Des Moines Public Schools about 35,000 students, and so very urban setting. Went from there to be a high school principal out in Dallas Center Grimes. It's a suburban school district, one of the fastest growing in the state.
That's on the west side of Des Moines?
On the west side of Des Moines. Right. They are growing by about 150 kids a year. There are about 2,700 kids in the district, so slightly smaller than Hudson. But some great opportunities, very high-performing district, did some great things there. And then decided to go and try the superintendent route. And
now, where did you get your doctorate in there?
Okay, so while I was out in Illinois, I started a master's degree at Aurora University out of Chicago. Finished that up, and then went into the specialist degree at Iowa State University. And so I did get a certificate of advanced studies at Iowa State University, which gave me the superintendent license, and then continued on to finish up with the PhD from Iowa State University as well. And so finished all those things up, and which gave me the ability to be a superintendent, and also it helped build my leadership capacity. So was able to utilize those things when I took over as the superintendent, shared superintendent of OA and BCIG, which is where I was before I came here.
Okay, and when you say shared superintendent, this is quite unique. You were the superintendent for 2 separate school districts?
Correct.
And those school districts were conjoined communities. So you had basically 4 communities, 2 hyphenated schools.
Yes.
Their own separate school boards.
Yes.
And again, refresh my memory, one was 5 and one was 7?
One was 5, one was 7, and so we did what was called whole grade sharing, which is something that's going to be new to Wisconsin now. The Governor Walker has brought that in. And what it is so each district had their own elementary school, and then all of both districts' middle school kids went to middle school in OA, and all of the districts, both districts' high school kids went to high school at BCIG. And so we ran joint board meetings, and when we sat down at the table, there were 12 people representing 4 communities, representing 2 school districts. And so it was definitely diplomacy 101 as far as working through different issues and things like that. Right. But had great experiences there, great people there, and really enjoyed my time there.
And so the path you come to Hudson, obviously we had the retirement of your predecessor announced in November, and we wanted to get a head start on other districts. So we kind of hired a search firm. And it's a good thing we did, because you wouldn't have this job without the search firm. As I understand, we had over 30 applicants, but in addition to those, the search firm wanted to ensure our quality of, and they actually came to you to see your interest.
Yeah, the search firm, I'd worked with the search firm on some other things, and they had contacted me and asked if I'd be interested in Hudson. At the time, I was only aware of Hudson, driving through, but wasn't overly familiar with the area. And they said, you got to take a look at it. It's an outstanding district. You really need to take a look at it. And so my wife and I made a trip up and thought, wow, this is really starting to become a great place. And we became cautiously optimistic. And so, yeah, the search firm kind of recruited me into the position and had the opportunity then to interview with the board.
And we did an all-day marathon session on Saturday. You were one of 6, and then one of the 3 finalists. And then when we had your more in-depth interview, you were interviewed by administration, a group of teachers, and community members made up of school board candidates.
Yes.
What did you think of that process?
Well, it was interesting because we were in the auditorium at Willow River, and so we were up on stage, and they were able to ask questions, which was always a good situation. But I think because of the way board elections work in Wisconsin, and they happen in April, I thought it was a great idea, whoever came up with it, to have those non-incumbent candidates be a part of the process, because they would essentially could be the people that I'd be working with moving forward. And I think it's obviously important for a school board to feel comfortable with their superintendent and all school board members. And so I thought it was a great experience. They had great questions, and it turned out really well. As
it turned out, 2 of those people who were interviewing went on to become board members then. And I have to say, when we interviewed you, of course, it was on the strength of the interviews, your background and everything. But what was really special about, we had obviously a closed session to decide, who we were going to make the offer to, and it was very special to have unanimous, very enthusiastic support for the person, and thank you for accepting the job. So you're here now, and I guess I want to kind of go through kind of your philosophy on education, leadership, but wondering, as you get used to things here, anything that has surprised you? I mean, based on your limited contact with Hudson through the interview and up to the point where you accept the job.
Well, I'll tell you what, Hudson every day gets better and better and better, the more and more we find out about it. As we went through the interview process, and we went from being cautiously optimistic to being excited and going to be downright disappointed should we not be able to get the position. And I say we because it really is a family decision.
Well, and you got to talk about that. We neglected to come with that right off the bat. Tell us about your family. You mentioned how you met your wife.
Yeah.
And so you guys have been married?
We've been married 12 years.
Okay.
My wife, Julie, and I. We have 3 boys. Jackson, who is 9, he'll be going into 3rd grade. Jacob is 5, and he'll be in preschool. And then Jasper is 2, and he's just very busy all the time. And, I will highlight, one of the things that we talked about with the interview process, the thing that really kind of sealed the deal or really reiterated how great of a place it was is I remember when you called and offered the position, one of the first thing you said was, Nick, is Julie there? And I said, yeah, she's here. Well, can you put her on speakerphone? And so we were both on the phone, and you made the offer for the position, and we accepted. And then I can't remember which board member it was. Maybe it was Bruce that said, Julie, are you still there? And she said, of course, yeah, I'm here. And he said, we want you to know that we're as excited to have you and your family in Hudson as we are to have Nick be our next superintendent. And that has gone, it was just a tremendous, comment, and it really kind of captured everything that I've experienced so far, that it really is a very welcoming community. It's been very welcoming, not only for myself, but for my family. And I bet I've retold that story 30 times since it's happened. And so, just a great
and I have
experience.
to say for our audience, something that impressed me on the way here is the fact that you're in this 2-day staff retreat, and we have a school board meeting tonight. As this is being taped, we're to start a school board meeting in about an hour. And despite a busy day, you made time to be with your wife and 3 sons for an hour today, and that really impressed me. It tells me a lot about you as an individual, and being a family person is important. So knowing that kind of background that you have and the values that you bring to the job, what is your philosophy on education?
You know, I think the goal of education is to equal the playing field for all people, to give them the tools they need to move forward. One of the things that my philosophy on education has changed over the years, because 20 years ago, prior to the internet, we were almost the gatekeepers of the information. You had to go to schools in order to get information, whereas now all that information is online. It's all free. People can access it any time of day or night. So what we've had to do is we've had to change the way we do business in order to continue to stay relevant, I guess would be for lack of a better term, and really look at what is our value added in education. How do we make sure that what we're doing with kids is more than they can just get on the internet or on an online course or just Googling and things like that. And so really it's about looking at how do we teach kids to be creators, how do we teach kids to work collaboratively, how do we teach kids to be problem solvers. A lot of those things that aren't always easily done through online courses and the internet. And so really taking that content that kids can get anywhere, applying it to real world situations, and really trying to make them be that 21st century learner, and so that we can prepare them for whatever they want to do. It doesn't matter what it is.
And you have had opportunity to see the HSD 2025, which was also a lot of community input on what the mission would be. And it sounds like your education philosophy fits very closely with HSD
Absolutely.
2025.
And that was part of the process. As you go through an interview process, or you look at any school district, you scour the internet to find out as much information as you can about them, because it's as much about interviewing the district as it is them interviewing you. And so knowing that plan was in place, or that framework was in place, really was another selling point as far as I was concerned, that there is a vision moving forward, that we are wanting to reach each and every child and make sure that each and every child gets to be a 21st century learner.
Well, and that's good. It's great to hear. I mean, how you worked your way up through the ranks. You've been an educator yourself, not just an administrator. So that's all good stuff. But it does come down to the buck stops with you. You are the lead position for the largest employer in St. Croix County. Yeah. One of the fastest growing counties in the country. So, what is your philosophy on leadership then?
Well, I think I have a very pragmatic style when it comes to leadership. And what I mean by that is, I think that we need to look for ways that we can serve the people that we're leading, and making sure that we're meeting their needs, and making sure that if we take care of their needs, then it's kind of like a trickle down. They take care of the needs of kids, and everybody wins in that case. Also, from a leadership standpoint, I think it's important to have work-life balance. I think it's important for our staff to understand that, yes, these are jobs. They're very high-demand jobs, especially when you're in leadership roles. But you also have to balance that with family and understanding what those needs are and what needs to come first at times. But I think, overall, the big component is just really focusing on how do you serve the organization. And when you're in that servant leadership mode and you're doing it in a very pragmatic way, I think that you start to meet those goals, and you start to see kind of things progress, and you see people reach their goals, and it works out pretty well for most people.
And you mentioned about goals. We're going to have a work session next week where the board's going to be talking about what we're going to tackle in the next year and so forth. Do you see, how do you assess the current state of Hudson School District? Do you think that we have some major changes that we have to do?
You know, it was interesting because I had this conversation with another building principal I hired, and we talked about the middle school because it's such a big job for that person. And one of the things that I told her when we worked through it is, you're going into a great place that's been middle school of the year. They've done some great things. But like any place, there's always room to grow. And I would say the same thing with the Hudson School District, and how I've approached it is the district obviously operates at a very high level. It's one of the highest achieving school districts in the state of Wisconsin. And so that's, again, things that were appealing. There aren't any things that just need, you know, drastic overhauls. It wasn't as though I was brought in because the previous person wasn't getting the job done, or because there were some, you know, major problems. I was brought in to build upon some of the great things that are happening, and then also look for ways that, you know, through my experiences, I can look to supplement those things and really try to continue to, you know, build upon those and those experiences. I think the thing that surprised me a little bit was how good everybody is. I mean, we really have great staff. Everybody's been very welcoming. I guess I shouldn't say surprised, but how pleasantly surprised I was by it. Mm-hmm. The administrative teams have been very high level, high functioning. Really have enjoyed working with them. The cabinet, the district cabinet, which would be my top administrators, have done a great job. The building principals seem to be outstanding. And so a lot of that is some credit. Obviously, credit goes to the previous superintendent, Mary, who has done an outstanding job hiring some great people. And so I look to kind of work with these people to try to continue to move our vision forward.
And we could probably continue for another hour about the different initiatives that have been started and to follow up on. But what do you see as some of the primary things that, you know, we need to address in the short term?
Mm-hmm. You know, one of the things I think we need to address, and I think we've already taken steps to address it, would be to increase transparency. And we are looking to do that by, for example, the board packet was out yesterday for the public ahead of the board meeting, something that we haven't done in the past. Continuing to try to you know, open things up for the public to give us feedback and to build upon the community engagement process that was started before I got here. And I think, you know, one of the issues that's obviously the elephant in the room is dealing with our secondary space issues. And I think we've started down that path. It's going to be a challenge, and it's something that needs to be tackled because it tends to kind of overarch everything we're trying to get accomplished. And so, you know, I think, you know, working towards that transparency piece, really understanding what the community is wanting from us, and then, you know, trying to deal with some of our secondary space issues and how we're going to address that in the future are going to be some of the big challenges.
And with that secondary space, and you're referring to the community engagement process at the process stewards, have you seen anything similar to that in other places? What do you think of the progress that's been made? They've been at it for 6 months plus now.
You know, they've done a tremendous job, and I know they've put a tremendous amount of time in, the process stewards have, and so that's just great to see. It's always hard when you're trying to engage the public, especially at the philosophical level, because they're really wanting to get down to the nuts and bolts, right. The decision-making part, or the solution part, I guess would be the best way to put it. And so I think from what I've seen so far, it's right on target with what I've seen in other districts, both larger and smaller districts. And I think we'll continue to see increased community engagement as we start to refine what those solutions look like for the secondary space.
Sure. And we don't have a specific date picked because that's going to be the subject of tonight's board meeting, but we're looking at something that's, you know, late August, early September for a workshop, and then sometime before the end of September coming up with a public hearing of those varied options. It could be as many as a dozen or so, but getting those narrowed down, and then the idea is to go to a survey. So we have still some work to go. But how do you feel about not being directly involved in that process? How does that feel when you're the superintendent and you see this other process and you're not as directly in control, if you will?
You know, I will tell you it's difficult because most people that have the job that I have a personality that likes to be hands-on, that likes to be involved in these processes. You know, I think there are good people working on it, so that gives me some sense of comfort as far as knowing that the people that are putting it together are doing a great job with it. I'm looking forward to the opportunity when we start to get the decisions made, that I can kind of run with those things and really get out and explain to people, where the decisions have come from, why we need what it is that we need. And
that's a great point. And I think being that, face for the district in conjunction with the board, I mean, we want to obviously be a support to you as well, but trying to put the community's interests and the school district's interest, forefront. And so it's going to definitely, explanation, I think, is a good point. And part of that transparency, too. If you make the decision, there's not going to be everyone agreeing with every decision we make along the way. But if you provide the explanation, well, people can, okay, I understand why you did that then. One of the things that we heard from the last referendum is criticism that we only put one option on the ballot. Well, under state law, that's all we can do. But
exactly right.
I think getting the public, we kind of went back to the drawing board to get them involved so that they can be part of the process of how the options are developed and narrowed and so forth. I think in the end we'll get the support that we need to whatever pass. We've got a board that I feel like they've been pretty open-minded. Now we're going to be talking more about it on criteria and so forth. So it's an evolving process, but you're right. Once we have that set, and if we can get the community along with us, then we can start talking about 5-year plans and so forth. Once that things like capital expenditures have all been a little bit stalled over the last several years, and I don't blame prior boards for doing that until we know what we're doing with our facilities. So, well, that's what's going on in the district. And do you have news about where I know we're in registration week. So where are we at for the year?
Absolutely. Well, right now our kindergarten class is bouncing around between 377 and 380, which would be the same time last year. I think we were 326, and so that's up possibly 54 kids from where we were last year. And now, although 1 year does not make a trend, if we continue to see these types of numbers, it will continue to put pressure not only on our secondary space down the road, but it will continue to put pressure on our elementary system as well.
Now, it's not just the kindergarten numbers, like even first grade, which was, I think, our low for the last 15 years was last year, but first grade numbers are up.
Yeah, and so even that same cohort group, that kindergarten class that started about 326, I think is up to about 345, 350 now to start first grade. And so one of the things that's unique about Hudson, and I guess not totally unique, but it's unique about suburban districts around large metropolitan areas, is you have a lot of migrant factors. We're in migration where you have people that it's not necessarily contingent on them living here when they start having children, but a lot of times they will move into the district after they've had children. And so our cohort progression has really, it really grows as we have classes that, although they may start at 326 in kindergarten, by the time they get to their senior year of high school, what we know for a fact is that they're, usually above 400. And so we're seeing tremendous growth that way. So if we're starting off with 400, 380, 400 in kindergarten, it wouldn't be unreasonable to think that by the time they're 9th or 10th graders that class is 500 plus. And so we do know at the high school right now, just got numbers today, the preliminary numbers are about 1830 at the high school right now, which is up about. And
give folks a reference, we have what's going to determine classroom capacity, not necessarily the common areas, but the classroom capacity of about 1680.
Yeah.
So we're going to be operating at 150 above that yet.
Yes.
And so we've had some analysis, and if people want to know more about that, they can go online. Everything's posted on the website.
Absolutely.
I was just there today, and we've got reports. People have questions. There's an opportunity to ask those. But everything that we've been looking at from this facility thing is online, including the program and the educational part of this as well. So,
absolutely.
All right. Well, is there any aspect, I guess we had talked a little bit about surprises overall, anything else other than the pleasant surprises you mentioned?
Really not. The surprise, I guess, that we're seeing from an enrollment standpoint is that we're seeing growth that really is not predicted. We've started getting some numbers from a demographer that the PST group has been using, the board's been using, and what we're finding is our numbers that we're actually, kids that are showing up are starting to surpass, what the starting points were that the demographer used. And so that's been kind of a surprise because we're starting to see that growth back, and I think a lot of areas aren't growing like we are, and so it's definitely a good problem to have, but it's going to present some challenges in the future as far as space issues, not only at the secondary level, but eventually probably at the elementary level and middle school level, and so. That's been somewhat of a pleasant surprise as well. Those increasing enrollments.
So we'll have a planning. We talked about school board operations. You had kind of mentioned about things that I have to give you credit because these were your ideas about increasing the transparency, publishing the minutes even a month or two sooner than what we were in the paper and so forth. So do you see any big issues for your first annual meeting? You're only going to be 2 months on the job and having the first annual meeting.
Yeah, I don't anticipate any major issues. I mean, there's nothing that we're looking to change. I mean, we're kind of heading down a certain direction. One thing I found with school districts in general, but especially the size of Hudson, which is a pretty good sized district, is that they're more like an ocean vessel. I mean, you really don't turn them on a dime. I mean, so if there are going to be changes that are going to be made, they're going to be gradual changes that you're going to have to project and really work that way. And so, no, the annual meeting, 2 months in, I wouldn't anticipate anything too earth shattering. The budget is shaping up about the way we thought it was going to shape up, and Tim Erickson's doing a great job.
Let's talk about the budget just a little bit because, again, some major changes that you had absolutely no control over. In fact, Madison had more control. As kind of the bad news and semi-good news was that first, in addition to the general aid, they thought the categorical aid was going to be cut. They restored the categorical aid, but kept kind of the frozen aid. Now, if we were one of the more rural districts, it would have been good news because rural districts saw an increase in their aid. But because Hudson the year before had experienced a 7.5% increase in our tax base, Madison, the way the formula works out, they interpret that as Hudson being a rich district, so they don't need as much state aid. And voila, we lost $2.6 million in state aid. And so are you comfortable with the way that the board is moving as far as how to cope with that?
Yeah, it's a combination. What we've done is a combination of budget reductions, which essentially is cuts, and backfilling some of that with property tax. We're at a point where you can't...
As well as using some of our reserve.
Yeah, exactly. We're using some of the reserves, but I think what people have to understand is you can't absorb a $2.6 million cut in state aid without having some impact on student programs if you don't figure out some other way to compensate. It will continue to be a challenge for us because Hudson's it looks like for the foreseeable future is going to continue to grow as far as at least the property values and things along those lines, and we're seeing that with new hotels going up and all those things. It's going to continue to be a challenge for us. I think we have to have a balanced approach. One of the things you have to understand is even though our collected property taxes may have gone up, our revenues are only going to go up 0.1%. And so I think that's important for people to understand is that although we may be backfilling some of that state aid cuts with property taxes, our overall net revenues are not going up. They're almost nothing. And our expenses are only going up about 1.25%, and so that's what's causing us to dip into our fund balance, obviously. And a 1.25% expense increase is, hardly keeping up with the rate of inflation. And so when you're thinking about all the different things the district has going on and all the different components with our new teacher salary structure and everything else we want to offer kids, the district is operating about as lean as they've ever operated, and will continue to do so. But there's going to be pressures that are going to cause us to have to look at alleviating some of that leanness because eventually it will start to have impact on the programs we offer for kids.
Well, you and I haven't even had a chance to talk about you went to a conference for new superintendents, and I went at the same time. I was at a conference for economics for school board members, and so I was in Green Bay. You were in Stevens Point. Now, did you get some feedback on what people say about Hudson? Just curious.
It's interesting. I've been to 2 different trainings since I've been here, and Hudson is very highly regarded across the state. And when I would introduce myself to different people, they would say things like, "Oh, You're the one that got the Hudson job, you know,
Okay.
you know, and so I think it was a very highly sought after position amongst people within the state. And
How'd that make you feel when they said
well, I tell you what, it makes you feel pretty darn good
Yeah.
when you're able to do those things. But I think overall, you know, the reputation Hudson has around the state is very high. As much as I'd love to claim ownership in that, I don't have that ownership
Right,
yet.
right.
But it really is a testament to what's been going on in the community and what's going on in the schools. As you mentioned before, it's the city of Hudson has been named the #1 place in Wisconsin to live sometime this spring. And so we definitely understood what that meant because we had trouble finding housing because it's such a competitive place where people want to live. And so, but no, it's what I'm hearing from around the state is, you know, obviously we're doing some great things. We can always do things better. We can always make tweaks, but people are definitely envious of a lot of the things that we have in Hudson.
Well, it's kind of the phrase, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And you're saying kind of the biggest deal that we need to address first is the secondary space then, and get some of these other new processes like the pay for performance of the teachers off on the right foot.
You know, I think it's important, you know, and I think the secondary space issue is really about, regardless of what enrollment does, it's about making our secondary space be reflective of what our community is. And when you go around the city of Hudson, the town of Troy, the town of St. Joe's, you see
And the village of North Hudson.
in the village of North Hudson, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
You see a very obviously proud communities, very well maintained communities, very high expectations. And really, what we need to do with our secondary space is kind of continue that same thing, regardless of what. And you know, if the enrollment is a point of contention for people, just the sheer way our spaces look don't match the way our community is. And so, you know, I think that's a point that most people need to see and understand. When you walk into Hudson High School, it's not that it's not clean; it's very clean. Our custodial staff does a great job. It's a tired building, and it needs to be updated. It needs to be brought into we need to have space for our kids that meet 21st century learning.
Well, it's not just appearance, it's also functionality.
Yes.
Is the other thing is that when you, what we have is a building that was never completely designed to be one full building. It was two buildings brought together by virtue of the reason of the fast growth of the district. And we've been putting together 3 to 5 year plans for 15 years now. So hopefully we're able to turn that corner and look forward to your leadership just overall and the programming as well. And I see that our time is about up here, so we hope that you can come back and whether it's me or whether it's one of the other correspondents, I'm sure they'll be able to get the straight scoop on the condition of Hudson School District.
Absolutely. I appreciate it. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. And thank you for joining us for another segment of Western Wisconsin Journal.